All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started so that we can stay on target. Welcome to Amber Vlangas' presentation about storytelling. Amber Vlangas, one of my favorite people, she's the executive director of Restorative Action Alliance. She works with the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. She serves as the chairperson for the National Coalition to End Conviction. I thought it was National Coalition Against Conviction Registries. It is. Okay. And co-hosts the Amplified Voices podcast, which is awesome if you haven't listened to it. She's an organizer, a human rights activist, survivor of sexual harm, and she's an advocate of reimagining how we address crime and seek justice in our society. She's a strong believer in the power of human connections and effective storytelling to create positive change. Amber's 25-year career in the nonprofit and public sectors has been focused on building power, gathering resources, increasing awareness, and developing solutions to deal with some of society's most pressing issues. Please welcome Amber Vlangas.
I'm a little shorter than Guy, so I have to go lower. So because of our screen, we've got for those who are on the internet, most of our audience is over here. So I'm going to try to address both, so bear with me. I appreciate everyone being here today, and again, thank you, Anne. It is an honor to be here with you all. As Guy mentioned this morning, it took a lot for all of us to be here. So the idea that everyone is here, has smiles on their faces, and is ready to sort of dig into this topic of storytelling is really touching my heart. So I'm going to just really quickly tell you a little bit about Restorative Action Alliance, which is the organization that I am the executive director of. I am, as was mentioned, a survivor of sexual harm, and also my family is impacted by the registry. And so Restorative Action Alliance exists to end cycles of sexual harm without the use of state violence, and in particular, state violence in the form of registries, excessive sentencing, unfair treatment, all of the things that go along with what we refer to as the registry regime, which it's not just the registry, it really is about the exceptionalism in the criminal legal system and our society when it comes to anything having to do with sex. So that's a little bit about Restorative Action Alliance. And so what I have found along the way in my life and career is that you can talk about statistics, you can bring all the facts, and people who are not willing to listen to any of that just don't care, right? But it is exponentially harder to look a full human in the face and say, well, I don't care, I don't see a human, and there still is a little bit of that, but we are wired as humans to connect with one another, and story is an exceptional way to do that. So if you remember, maybe as a child, stories were a way that you could express yourself, or the way that you learned about the world, going all the way back to, fairy tales and parables, whatever your background is. So when we talk about advocacy and reaching people and changing public perception, story is an amazing tool. And today we are specifically going to be talking about structuring your personal story in a way that is effective for advocacy and why that matters. So when we talk about our lived experiences, especially related to harm, systems, and justice, we often feel, again, a lot of pressure to rely on those statistics and facts. But I'd like to share a quote by Barbara Greene. You can advance. We don't need to talk about the goals. Nope, go again. just go one more and we'll come back to this one. Okay, here's Barbara Green. There we go. So if you tell me, it's an essay. If you show me, it's a story. And I have found this to be true over and over again in my own experiences, and I've seen it with legislators, I've seen it with people in power, I've seen it with coffee table conversations. And so we really want to be able to structure our story in a way that reaches people. So we're going to go back a slide, Andy. Okay, and we're going to start to talk about the elements of story itself. So you may have learned this in literature class or whatnot, but this is one way to think about story and how we structure our personal stories. What is the conflict, right? So what is the central struggle that brought you to this fight, that happened in your life that made you care about the issue? Who are the characters in that story? So who are the people involved? It might be you, it might be your family, it might be your loved one, it might be other stakeholders, it might be, other people that were just impacted by what happened. Utilizing imagery, so what did you see, what did you hear when you're structuring the story? How did you feel in your body? How can you describe it? All of those things. Foreshadowing is really important, and it really speaks to what happens, leading up to and after, but also what will happen if nothing changes, and why is that super important? And then for advocacy, it is very, very, particularly in when you're talking about topics that are super controversial, right? Which, we can all agree that people find topics that we're advocating on controversial, is really challenging underlying assumptions. So what beliefs is the story challenging that might be pervasive in culture, that might be part of your audience's underlying assumptions or premises about who you are or the issue that you're advocating for. So I wanted everybody to take just a quick moment and think of a moment in your life when you may have challenged or you may have been challenged around a belief that society holds about people like you. And most people will have some idea of this because you're going to find that that's where your power lives. So just sort of in your mind, nobody has to call out or anything yet. We're going to get to the interactive part. But think about a time when you may have heard somebody saying something about these issues, about your loved one, about yourself, and you thought, that's not me. That's not what I stand for. My story is a story of humanity. That's where your power lives. So let's move to the next slide. Skip that one. All right. One of the things that we definitely want to address when we are engaging with our personal stories is that we always want to speak from scars but not open wounds, because that can be counterproductive. So what do I mean by that? So understand that as an advocate, nobody is entitled to your story in a way that they want to hear it at a time that they demand it. And you need to take your power back. So this is something that I often had to learn the hard way, because I was somehow thinking that the only way to change things is to tell my story as often as possible to whoever would listen in a way that felt good to them. That didn't go well for me. It really sort of weighed on mental health. And so this is a critical component when you're developing your story. And So you always want to make sure that you are in a place when you're developing your story and you're deciding who you share it with it and when, that you're speaking from a place of, I want to energize. I feel energized. I want to empower other people. This is important to me. I'm able to at the time, and in a way that you feel comfortable with. And then if there is, parts of your story or whatnot that are too difficult for you to share in a public space, then don't do it, or reframe it in a way that has you speaking from your place of power. Okay? So we're gonna go to next slide. We're gonna talk about sort of underlying assumptions, okay? I think my notes are not lining up. So the underlying assumptions are, you really want to meet people, right, where they are. So you need to know what people's underlying assumptions are when you're developing your story. And I think let's just, if anybody wants to name one, just raise your hand or whatnot. Are there underlying assumptions that you think that people have about the issues that we work on? Anyone? Come on, guys. This is interactive. All right, right over here.
Assuming that everybody on the registry is a pedophile.
Okay, so there is assuming everyone on the registry is a pedophile. Give me another one. Right over here, sir. So that they are ready to recommit another act, or can't stop, won't stop, all of those things.
Or danger to society.
Danger. Jesse?
Only violent criminals get put on the registry.
Good one. Only violent criminals get put on the registry. I'm repeating so folks at home can hear. Right over here. Oh, law enforcement is right all the time. That is an interesting one. Well, the thing is that law enforcement are people too, and they are subject to the same cultural messaging that others are. Last one. The high recidivism rate. So we know that we're up against some deeply ingrained moral panic-based underlying assumptions about the things that we're advocating for. So we want to make sure that we are in our story, by humanizing ourselves and utilizing our personal story, that we are challenging those underlying assumptions, and we're not inadvertently reinforcing by repeating talking points and utilizing language of the opposition, if you will. So that brings us to our person first language slide. I see me, there we go. All right, and so a lot of people who have been in this movement for a while are familiar with this concept, but we don't want to use the language of the system to describe ourselves, and don't use the language of our oppressors in order to describe ourselves and others. So, what does that mean? That means not referring to ourselves as sex offenders, because that freezes you in a moment in time, or felons, or utilizing that language for other people. So when we think about we're being treated unfairly, and people with other types of offenses, we might say, well, a murderer doesn't have to register. But again, we're using language that is flattening somebody else to their crime, and then we're sort of alienating individuals that could be allies. So we want to make sure that we're sticking to person first language that centers the humanity of the person first. So what might that look like? So rather than saying I'm a sex offender, someone may say, I am a person who is subject to registry restrictions or required to register. Rather than saying that I am a felon, you can say maybe I am system impacted, I am in reentry. And at the end of the day, if it's not necessary for context, you can just say, hey, I'm a person, I'm a mother, I'm an advocate, I'm an activist, I'm whatever, however you want to frame yourself, and also allowing others to frame themselves in a way that feels best to them. All right, moving to our next slide, where we're going to talk about our frames messaging. So this is like a useful framework, frames messaging, where this is like a little checklist that you can use when you're thinking about story. So framing the issue in the way that is in line with the values, reframing the opposition's narrative, so that's how we sort of challenge it, make it accessible to whatever audience that you are talking to. You want it to be memorable. This is where some of that like imagery and storytelling and how does it feel allows people to like also feel the same thing. So that kind of connects people to the story. Emotions are very, very powerful things. So how were you feeling? What are the emotional things that, again, what will happen if things don't change? What did happen? All of those things. And in most cases, you want it to be short and simple. So there are different ways to advocate. So if you're in front of the legislature and they're like, you've got 3 minutes and they're ready to cut you off right away, then you need to be within 3 minutes. But so for instance, the Amplified Voices podcast is long form storytelling. So, you know, if you are on a show or you have an opportunity to tell your story in a different way, or it's in written long form, you can have it being a little bit longer, but you also want to make sure that you're framing the story about whatever it is that you're advocating for. So what does that look like? We all know that the issues that we work on and the registry impact every facet of your life, right? And there's a million different things and a million ways that you could focus on something. But if you are asking a legislator or someone in power or even someone at, you know, your coffee table or a neighbor to change their mind on a thing, you don't want to add everything because it's going to be overwhelming and you will run out of time and people can only really focus on sort of 1 or 2 concepts at one time because we're all human. So it is useful to keep things very relevant to your final ask. So we're going to move to our next slide, Andy. All right, so, and I'm going to have to ask you for one more favor, Andy, and that is to play our audio clip. This is long-form storytelling in action. Nothing happening. All right. All right. Okay. Well, so we don't have the audio feed, so we will come back to that if we can, and if we can't, we'll adjust. We're going to talk about short form storytelling in action, which is not an audio clip. So this is an example of storytelling, and I'll set the stage for where it comes from. This was testimony that was given before the Connecticut legislature in efforts to change a very specific component of the law. So in Connecticut, there is a process by which you receive a letter, and you need to return that letter within 10 days, and that is to verify your address if you are required to register. Now, I know people from other states that have to do this in person are going to go, oh, well, what a luxury. But the issue in Connecticut is that what would happen is in that 10-day window, people wouldn't get the mail. There would be all of these problems, and now you are out of compliance and subject to failure to register. So the purpose of the bill was to extend the time frame to make sure that the process, if you didn't receive your letter, you could request another one, and then you would have a certain period of time, and also to reduce the punishment or the crime from a felony to a misdemeanor if you did find yourself in a situation where you went afoul, and to add a component of intent rather than, oh, this is a clerical error and now somebody is charged with a felony and sometimes reincarcerated for longer than they were incarcerated in the first place for the crime they originally committed. So I'm going to read the testimony, and you can be sort of thinking about, as you're listening, some of these components of stories, and we'll talk about it. So thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Amber, and I'm here to ask you to reconsider a law that, as it stands, threatens to tear families apart over simple human mistakes. Every 3 months, a letter arrives in our mailbox. It's just a piece of paper, but it carries the weight of a felony charge if not returned within 10 days. My husband is required to verify his address with the state, and if that letter isn't received in time, no matter the reason, he could be ripped from our family again. A few months ago, while my husband was away for a few days, I drove up our dirt road to get the mail with our 11-year-old son. Like any other day, he jumped out, grabbed the bundle of letters, and stuffed them into the seat pocket of the car before we drove home. The bills, junk mail, and political flyers were all mixed in with the verification letter. He was focused on his homework, whatever was on his mind that day, and I was focused on dinner, laundry, and getting through another long afternoon before the work the next day. The letter was forgotten in the back seat. 2 days later, I found it while unloading groceries. My stomach dropped. My hands started shaking. That single piece of paper sitting there crumpled under the grocery bag was a time bomb. If I hadn't noticed it, if a few more days had passed, my husband could have been arrested, charged with a felony, taken from our home, not for harming anyone, not for doing anything wrong, but because a piece of mail got displaced. Something that could happen to any one of you here, and I don't understand how this is justice. It does not serve public safety to tear families apart over paperwork. I'm asking you to change the law. First, I'm asking to add an element of intent. A person should not be charged with a felony for an honest mistake. If someone is deliberately avoiding registration, that is one thing, but losing a piece of mail should not be treated in the same way. Second, extend the deadline to return the verification letter. 10 days is an unreasonably short time for something this severe. A simple delay, a missed day at the post office, shouldn't mean a family is thrown into crisis. And finally, I ask you to reduce the penalty. If someone misses the deadline, it shouldn't be a felony. It should be an infraction, something that reflects what it really is, a clerical issue, not a crime. This law, as written, does not make our community safer, and it affects my family deeply. It punishes families like mine, families who are trying to live quietly, well, and follow all of the rules. Please change the law and keep our families together. Thank you. So what are some of the things that we noticed in this particular story? Anyone? Dramatic. So you sort of felt the imagery. The paper crumpled under the grocery bag, right? Hands shaking. Other? Humanized. Thrown into a crisis, hit, right in the back there. Universally relatable. That is key, absolutely. Something I did could affect something else. This is critical because the truth of the matter is, does my husband have control over his 11-year-old crumpling the thing in the back seat? Not at all. Right in the back there, Larry. Time bomb, absolutely. Right up here. Reliance on family to keep you out of prison. So this is showing an impact deeply on everyone who's involved. In the back there. Framed clearly. Super. Jesse?
You stayed focused on the issue and tried not to bring in extraneous details that would distract from staying right on message.
Yes, so directly related to the ask for the advocacy. Last one? Non-confrontational. Thank you. So it was firm enough, right, to say, I'm asking you to do this and this is why, but also humanizing the legislators, saying this could happen to anyone, and I'm not demanding, I'm not saying that you're calling me the scum on the bottom of our shoe, or all of those things that sometimes isolate and our normal ways of feeling, right? We feel a certain way because we're being oppressed and we're being treated very unfairly. But again, when we're talking about advocacy, the way you might tell a story to your friend and the way you might need to utilize story for advocacy is a little bit different. Okay, so Jesse, did we get our handouts out to everyone? All right, and so in our last bit of time together, so what is my time? Is it 11:15? Anyone know?
It is 11 now.
All right, I mean, when are we done? 11:15. Okay, good. I'm really glad it's not 11:15 because we were going to have to skip our exercise. So we're going to take, you have a worksheet that has sort of the outlying components of story. And I want everyone who feels comfortable, and again, you don't have to share anything if you don't want, to take some time to think about the context of your own story and utilize the worksheet to just brainstorm and jot down some information in the different categories. And you'll see the prompts there on your worksheet. So we're going to take about 10 to 15 minutes to do that, okay? Because it's not, so at 11:15, we're going to sort of come back to it. And folks at home, I'm really sorry, but I don't know, I guess I'll just stand here and grin while they're doing that. All right, I could verbally go over what we're doing. Can someone hand me a... No, I should have done that. I didn't think about the online. So on the worksheet, I'm just going to give you a prompt. Okay, y'all do your thing, and I'm going to give the folks at home a prompt. You want to think about what is the conflict? What is one key moment of conflict or struggle that brought you into this advocacy work? What happened that made you say, this isn't right, or something has to change? So jot down a few thoughts about that, and I'll give you another prompt in just a moment. We could try. so glad. Oh, the prompts are on the slide. It's a whole new world not seeing the slide. So after you've thought about your conflict, you want to think about who are the characters in your story? Who are the people who are involved? You might think of yourself, your loved ones, any officials or systems, who supported you, who harmed you, what harmed you, did somebody misunderstand you, or who stood with you? Think about the imagery to help see what you saw, help whoever it is that you're telling the story to. You might want to choose a vivid image, maybe describing a sound or a physical detail from your story. What did the room look like? What words were said? What might it have felt like in your body? So, for instance, Guy earlier today said he felt the most free with handcuffs on, sitting in a cell. So that gives you a flavor of like, what was I feeling at the time? So you also want to think about the underlying assumptions that we talked about before. What assumption does your story challenge? What false belief or stereotype does your experience help to break? For example, people on registries are dangerous forever, or punishment equals justice and safety. How does your story, your humanity, the thing that you are trying to move forward, illustrate that we're not always talking about a boogeyman in the woods, or that all survivors support registries, whatever it is that your lived experience is, bringing that in a way that may surprise people who are depending on pervasive cultural underlying assumptions. And then finally, thinking about foreshadowing and vision. This is where your ask comes in. What happens if nothing changes? What harm might continue? Then flip it. What is your vision? What do you want people to feel, believe, or do after hearing your story? Do you want them to change a law? Do you want them to tear down a stereotype? Do you want them to tell someone else? Do you want them to be empowered to tell their own story? Think about all of those sort of things and how your story can contribute to that. So we're going to give about 5 more minutes for people to sort of fill in their different ways. And this is a mapping worksheet. So you can take this along with you and start to develop your story in a solidified, cohesive way. But you don't necessarily have to have that done sitting here right in this room. Okay, you guys have about 4 more minutes. All right, we're down to our last minute, so make your final sort of entries, and then you can always return to your worksheet anytime. And this mapping worksheet, which Kim will be super excited to hear, will get published on our website. I'm creating something for her to do, so we'll get that up on the Restorative Action Alliance website in case you want to use it for another time. And then we're going to try to play this audio clip from here into the microphone. It might be bad, but we're going to try. Because we are the kind of group that adapts and overcomes no matter what. So to give context to this clip, if we are able to get it to work, this is a clip from the Amplified Voices podcast. The Amplified Voices podcast is a podcast that uplifts the voices of people who are impacted by the criminal legal system. We're currently in our 5th season, and we've talked to a lot of people from all across the country about their experiences, either as someone who has been impacted by the system themselves, their family member, people who are survivors, who were also impacted by the system in different ways. We try to focus on lived experience people, folks who have never had a chance to tell their story in a way where they were able to tell their story and frame it in a way that shows their humanity. So this is an episode that is a woman who is the spouse of someone who is required to register. And the clip that I'm playing is her sort of describing the day that their lives were upended. You're not going to hear the whole podcast, but you will want more. So please go ahead and check it out on your favorite podcast platform. But try to think about these components of story and how she sort of is breaking down some of these false ideas about people in this situation.
Studying to get a master's of social work. She wants to become a treatment provider. She is also a full-time business owner, among many other things that she does. Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, Jason and Amber.
Thank you so much for being here. Before we really jump into the conversation, one of the first things we would like to ask you is to tell us a little bit about your life before you got involved with the criminal legal system, and then what happened and how it changed.
All right. I was a stay-at-home mom. I just got to stay home and chase kids and go to soccer practice and all that stuff.
How many kids did you have at that point?
My youngest was 1.5, and my boys, they were like 8 and 9, maybe.
Can we mention the state that you're from?
I am in Iowa. I grew up here. My husband grew up here. We had been married for 19 years, and we've been together 4 years before that. So we've known each other for a long time. We've been involved in our community, involved in our church. We had a janitorial business, which we still have, and it was very successful at that time. He worked in the evening, so we have odd hours, a little different life than most people.
Here we are in Iowa. Nancy is living there. She's got a beautiful life. She's got 3 kids. So what happens?
So my husband and I were sitting around on a Tuesday morning, I think it was, and drinking coffee. My toddler daughter's playing around. We're just in our pajamas still, and all of a sudden we hear boom, boom, boom on our front door and our back door. And usually when I'm telling this story, I will pound on the table just to illustrate how loud it was to my audience. And everybody jumps. And that's exactly what we did. We jumped. My husband went to the front door. I went to the back door. I don't even think I opened the door. All of a sudden, cops start pouring in our house. I don't know how many there were. I'm guessing a dozen. The only face I recognized was our local chief of police, whom I'd known for 25 years. And he looked stunned to be there too. The police just came in, they're yelling. They went to the top of the basement stairs and they said, "Is anybody down there?" And I'm like, "No, I don't think so." And they're all wearing ICE uniforms. And I'm thinking, I'm sympathetic to undocumented people, but I don't have any in my house. So what are you doing here?
Right.
And it was right after April 1st too. Everybody's thinking, is this a joke? This has to be a joke, or they're at the wrong house.
Right.
They made me sit down at my kitchen table, and they made my husband sit down at our dining room table around the corner. And I'm looking at the chief of police. And I'm like, "Hey, Jim, what's going on?" He goes, "I don't know." He said, "I don't know."
So ICE had contacted him, and the chief of police doesn't even know why he's there.
Right. And I didn't talk to him after that because I'm thinking he's in on this whole thing. And I talked to him a year later, and he said, "I was just as stunned as you." And he was tearing up too.
Oh my goodness.
They called him as a courtesy because they were coming to town. He said that's a regular thing that they do. They said, "Meet us at the gas station and follow us where we're going." And he's like, "I couldn't believe we were at your house."
Wow.
Turns out that supposedly U.S. Marshals do that kind of a raid. We found out later, but they were all busy or something. So they called Homeland Security, and that's how ICE comes in. They all got Kevlar on. They've all got their hands on their guns. Nobody pulled a gun. My dog was going crazy. I could just think of stories where cops shoot dogs, and I'm like, "Don't shoot my dog. Don't shoot my dog. Let me get her in her kennel."
And at this point, where are your children?
My daughter was in my arms. She was 1.5. So I think she was just like, "Oh, people are here."
Right.
So yeah, they sat me at the kitchen table, told me I couldn't leave. I said, "My neighbor girl."
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. So, because this is a long form storytelling, but what are some of the things that you noticed that Nancy shared that either are challenging an assumption, or you were surprised by, or you learned from? Anyone? Tammy?
Definitely the ice.
So something that felt unexpected, that humanized, like this felt very confusing and chaotic, like what is happening here? Right here?
Story I've heard from too many people, and unfortunately, recently happened to me on a search warrant.
Right. And so do you think that this is... Oh, okay. So yes, thank you. So he said this is something that happens to too many people and something that recently happened to him. And so I think what I take from that, my question to you is, do you feel that the general public knows that this is how those things, expects that this is the way that it goes down? So that challenges a bit of an assumption about how people are treated. So any other?
Just because someone is law enforcement doesn't mean that they're doing something evil and malicious.
That's a really good one, because again, this humanizes sort of different people in this story. The chief of police is like, "I don't know why I'm here." His name is Jim, right? So he is now a character within this story that has been developed in a way. Other thoughts? 23 years. So he's saying that they were together for 23 years. So that's challenging this assumption that, like, folks who are on the registry are living in their mom's basement and don't have families and things like that. You hear her say, my toddler daughter, we were drinking coffee on a regular Sunday morning. My toddler daughter is just sort of toddling around. And what about some of the imagery that she uses? Sound, Larry? So Larry says the details about the dog, does that feel like something people can relate to? Anne? Bang, bang, bang on both doors. And so getting that idea of sort of the chaos that was happening and the confusion that ensued. Very loud bangs. And on a funny note, when you're on a podcast and we actually tell our guests, please don't tap, please don't do all the things. So that's why she had to say what I usually do, which I can't do on this podcast. That gives you sort of a flavor of some stories in action and some tools to take away with you as you continue to develop your own story. We have until 11:45, so that gives us some time for questions. So I want to go ahead and just remind everyone that your story is your power. And it's a matter of stepping into your story in a way that feels meaningful to you and can inspire others to do the same and connect with people on a human level if you would like to inspire them to take an action. So again, whether that's changing a law, whether that is doing something for themselves to also advocate, whether it is changing your neighbor's mind about how people feel about these issues. It's a very, very effective way and also cathartic to step into your power and know that you have a story and it's very valuable and is critically valuable to the movement to end sexual harm and abolish registries. So with that, I'll go ahead and take some questions.
Come up
I'm
to the
sorry, I
microphone,
forgot to
please.
remind folks to take a little walk over to the mic.
You have a wireless that we could walk around if people.
Oh, there's also a wireless, I guess. Push the button.
Can you please share an example, both short and long form, where the stories were impactful, either with a law that was changed or somebody called in and they were able to tell their story? I'm just wondering about the outcomes.
So we have seen, we do a lot of advocacy in the states within that we work with. And so one of the things that I can particularly think about is we had individuals share stories in the Connecticut legislature on 2 legislative sessions where they were trying to implement laws that would exclude people with criminal convictions and on the registry, certain types of convictions from nursing homes, which was not currently in the law. So we had individuals who came and told their stories about that. We also, in Connecticut, also had a task force that was around studying the collateral consequences of a criminal conviction. And we had a daughter of a person who was required to register who actually wrote a poem. And it was about her father as her hero because he had gone through this, came out on the other side, continues to help people. And she sort of, at the end of the poem, throws it back, says, "Is your father a hero too?" And it was very, very effective, and it was actually instrumental in stopping a bill that would create a tiered system that was really at the mercy of a board that was made up of victim advocates and mostly law enforcement and so on and so forth. So those are 2 examples of how story can be really powerful. Oftentimes, story is really powerful in blocking bad things because unfortunately we find ourselves in the space where most of the work is about preventing future harm to people who are required to register. And there are times when there is time for offense, but most of the work that we see in the current environment is blocking something that will be additionally harmful. Great question, thank you.
Right at the front of it.
Thank you. It's really not a question. We all have our story, but when our story began, we started learning the story. And that's why we're here at Narsau. The conflict that you were mentioning to begin our story, what brought us here? Why do we want to make a difference? This isn't my personal story, but it is an observation that I've made while I've been on my journey, learning that while you're incarcerated, if you have children at home, you're separated from them during that time. But then when you are released on parole, depending on the PO, there they might want to keep you 5 more years of living under the same roof with your children. Mm-hmm. And that did not affect me, but as I've met individuals that affected, to me, that's one of the most powerful things of the story, because I don't think the public realizes the system is doing that to people when they're getting out of incarceration, of separating them from their children when their offense had nothing to do with their children or a minor.
Right. Can I ask you a real quick question?
Yes.
What is your, how did you meet the people that you're referring to, or how did you come to know this?
Sitting in a cell, 24 hours with guys, going to treatment, listening to everybody's story. And so we each have our little story.
Right.
But the system that I have learned about, what the system does to a person may be 100 times worse than the offense that person committed. And that is the story that why we need to be advocates, because of just the harshness of the conflict that maybe started all this, but the remedy that they give is just horrendous, so much punishment, so punitive. That motivates me to come to Narsau, because there's a lot of spouses and a lot of children. We may have committed the offense and never want to offend again, but so many people have suffered because of the remedy that the system has given us.
Right. So I'm going to ask you to sort of summarize just, and I have a couple of comments, and thank you so much for sharing that, because I think we can all find in our own experience that to be true. So there are 2 comments that I have about, sort of what you were sharing. It obviously did affect you, and you have experience with it because you're here showing up and it mattered enough to you. It affected you in some way. So tell that story. What I want to make sure that I'm cautioning people against is taking liberty to tell other people's stories. So talking about a system is one thing, but telling someone else's story that doesn't belong to you through your own lens can be problematic. So we always want to make sure that we're ethical in our storytelling, particularly in advocacy organizations, because reframing someone's story without their consent, utilizing someone's story for something that they didn't consent to, or frankly telling someone's story without their consent is not good. And I want to speak really quickly to people who support those on the registry, because that is my experience. I work very hard to talk about how things have affected me and what my experiences has been, but my husband's story is his to tell, right? So we want to always be mindful that as we're supporting people, we are doing it in a way that, again, is ethical and meaningful. So thank you so much for sharing that. But when we're speaking about systems, if we go too far into the sort of macro whatnot, that's appropriate in some settings. But what we're really speaking about today is that sort of personal storytelling and why that's effective. All right, we got a question over here.
Yeah, so earlier it was sort of suggested that your story is your story and no one can attack your story. And my experience is that is not exactly true. People will attack your story, and it's at least in my experience, it's a unique thing because when you're talking about data or when you're talking about policy or talking about things, it allows you to have some distance from it. When it's your story and you're being attacked, it's a whole different experience. You feel differently and you feel more defensive and you become more. And so I was just wondering what your tips are for when people do come at you when you're sharing your story, because I suspect all of us have had that experience at some level.
I love that you are asking that question because this has happened to people, and it is a risk you take when you are sharing your personal story. So I usually reflect back on the person who is doing the attacking with a question of my own. And so I'll give an example. We had a situation where we have an advocate that works with our organization who went to the legislature and shared their personal story. And a legislator actually pulled up their record in real time and talked about it directly in the hearing. So I say that not to scare people, but there are ways to be prepared for it. And that particular advocate was sort of prepared for that, deflected back with a question about the policy itself. So I appreciate you. It will happen. And you have to, once again, it goes back to being ready. If you are in a fragile state, even up to right before you're about to tell your story, it's okay to say, I can't do this right now, right? So that's why practice and really getting things really concise and easily relatable is really important. Thank you for the question.
I was just wondering, how do you find people to get on the Amplified Voices podcast? Do like people listen to it and then say, ooh, I want to do this too, and like contact you and say that, or do you mostly have to go find people on your own?
All right, you're hired. Just kidding. So it is a combination of many methods. So we do have a form on the Restorative Action Alliance website that if you're interested in telling your story, you can fill out that form. We also are in community with a lot of people, and we identify. We do try to cover things that are relevant to the moment, and we do seek out stories that can speak to those things. So for instance, we had a couple of things that were really specific to solitary confinement when we were working on that in the legislature, some things with releasing folks who are aging in prison or providing a fair process for parole. We connected it to that. So the answer is, if you have a story that you would like to tell or you would like to be considered, which does not indicate that every story is right for the podcast, you can reach out and on our website or also at admin@restorative-actionalliance.org. And we actually have a couple of people in this room who have been on the podcast. So, all right, thanks for the question.
Yeah, so my name is Maylee. So my question is, so as someone who's also experienced sexual abuse, I think like obviously people create a lot of narratives specifically about victims of sexual abuse, or I don't even know if I want to use the word victims, or I don't know if I like to apply that label to myself. But anyways, specifically, if you don't fit like that stereotype of what a good victim is supposed to be, I feel like your story is almost denied. In my experience, when I feel like I showed resilience, or if I said, you know, I don't want to go about responding in a way that's very punitive, like in your case, people in a way would almost say that I'm just denying my trauma or minimizing my own trauma. So I was wondering, how did you respond to that, or how should one respond to that so you can challenge their underlying assumption? And how do you label yourself in that situation? Because is it then problematic to label yourself as a victim? Yeah.
That is a really, really great question, and thank you for it. So this is a sort of topic area that is complicated, but there is a way to navigate it. So my response to folks when they sort of come at me with those thoughts is that I'm very serious about ending cycles of sexual harm. And the way to end cycles of sexual harm is to center those who have been harmed and also provide support to individuals who have harmed, because radically destabilizing people does not create safety. So it depends on the context as to how the language that is utilized to describe someone. And so I tend to throw it back to people if they want to sort of default to these tropes, these us and them ideas, or they are questioning my experience as a survivor. I will throw that back to them and say, are you serious about ending cycles of sexual violence? And I would encourage everyone to check out our Many Truths program, which Restorative Action Alliance is doing. It's a creative expression program, and we're doing an opening on November 1st. It's a virtual event. So folks from Many Truths, Breaking Down False Dichotomies is the name of the program. People have submitted artwork, poetry, writing, and we are doing this opening to really illustrate the complexity and humanity of all of these issues. So we have those who have been harmed, and those who have support those who have either harmed, and also those who have harmed that have submitted. So I would encourage everybody. It is on November 1st. You can find information at our table and at the Restorative Action Alliance website. So would love to see you there, and thank you for the question.
You.
Yes, I love your storytelling concept, and I use it all the time, and I want to tell my story. Empathy for the listener is very important, and my story begins. I was speaking at the Senate, and to the head senator for Florida, and I told him I was in the hospital. This is my portion of the story. I was in the hospital for 7 days. We have a triggering thing at 3 days that you have to give a 3-day residency, temporary residency thing. And I was unable to do that because I was incoherent with a high fever. And when I started coming around where I was starting to think and becoming rational, I told him the fear in me was just horrendous. And I called my handler. He's a very good actor, by the way. And he says, no problem. And it was all handled. Well, we don't live in the days of Andy Mayberry anymore. And the senator looked at me very simply. Well, the law enforcement will just take care of those things as a matter of fact. And that's where the empathy comes in. Mm-hmm. Because now you can say, no, they don't. But you have to refrain yourself from saying that that's not the truth of it, because there are a lot of bad actors in law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. So it is important anytime you're doing any sort of advocacy work, and we're relating the storytelling to advocacy, that you leave all avenues open for connecting with someone as a human, right? So when we're making absolute statements, which we don't want people to do for our populations, we don't want all survivors to be labeled into one thing, right? There are survivors that have a full breadth of experience. We don't want those who are impacted by the system to be all lumped into one thing. We want to make sure that we're not doing that also to our opponents, because that breeds disconnection, and nobody's listening to you when you're disconnected. So we want to be mindful of that. And that is a dance and very difficult to do when you're sitting in front of someone whose views basically say, hey, I don't really think you're human. But hearing them and understanding why they have those assumptions and working to tear those down is more effective than coming at them, and there's a time and a place for all of that. So I need someone to ring the bell because I can't ring the bell while I'm presenting, but we can take one last question. That's all right.
Hi, I'm Nathan. Thank you. This is an awesome talk. I was debating with a friend, and
there you
go. We had the question regarding human-centric language, specifically referring to yourself intentionally as a sex offender, and the concept that if you take away the shame by owning a label that they try to force on you, it loses its power against you. What do you think about that?
So I can hear that argument, but I vehemently disagree, because when we are talking to other people, and particularly in advocacy, there are trigger words that immediately have people feeling unsafe, or also just frankly not listening to you. So that might feel good. That might be like, I feel like I'm taking my power back, but you're giving your power away, because in advocacy, nobody will be listening to you when you do that. So that's my sort of pushback on that. But I do appreciate the idea that someone would want to take their power back. I just sort of disagree with that as a way to do it.
Thank you.
All right, I think we are now wrapping up Ding the Ding. Perfect. Thank you, everyone, and I'm around. You can certainly ask any questions out at the table.